What is going on, y'all? This is Pay Me in Dividends, and today is September 15th, 2025. Welcome back to the channel. If you're new to the channel, I talk about income generating investments through the stock market. All right. And today I want to talk about SPMO, which is a growth ETF that I've recently added to my portfolio. It's been a little over a month now that I've owned this ETF, and I just want to give you guys a quick rundown as to why I own this ETF, and then I'm also going to show you some personal results in my own brokerage account of since I've started investing in this ETF and the gains that I've made so far, the unrealized gains that I've made so far in the market through this ETF. All right, so SPMO is it's an S&P 500 momentum ETF, and right here you can see on the product details, the ETF is based on the S&P 500 momentum index. The fund will generally invest at least 90% of its total assets in the securities that comprise the index. The index tracks the performance of stocks in the S&P 500 index that have a high momentum score. All right, the fund and the index are reconstituted and rebalanced twice a year. So basically what this ETF is doing is it's taking the S&P 500. They've then developed a method or a formula in order to appoint a momentum score to the individual companies within the S&P 500, and then they take those top 100 companies in the S&P 500 and they invest and they prioritize those in their ETF. Right, so basically they're taking the best of the best from the S&P 500 and prioritizing those companies in order to outperform the traditional S&P 500. All right, and this is not a new ETF. This ETF has been around since, let's see here where the inception date is, 2015, October of 2015. All right, so it's coming up on 10 years that this ETF has been out. As you can see, the amount of holdings is 100. Again, they prioritize the top 100 companies in the S&P 500 based off of their own momentum score, quote unquote. So basically they're finding the companies that are high performers or have the potential to be high performers moving into the future, and twice a year they will rebalance their portfolio in order to continue prioritizing those companies. And if you look at the top 10 holdings in this ETF, you'll notice that there are some familiar faces that are correlate to other big name ETFs such as Nvidia, Meta, Amazon, Broadcom, Tesla, Palantir, Netflix. But you'll notice there's a couple companies here in their top 10 holdings that you don't typically see in other top 10 holdings of big ETFs. All right, like you have JP Morgan Chase, you have Walmart, you have Costco. All right, these are companies that you don't typically see in the top 10 holdings of a growth ETF. But if you look at the performance of these individual companies, you'll see that as of recent, they've been performing very well. And so that is why they're in the top 10 holdings of SPMO, because again, this ETF is prioritizing their holdings based on performance and not just based on whether the company is in the S&P 500, because you got to keep in mind there are certain metrics and certain criteria that a company has to meet in order to be included into the S&P 500, but that doesn't necessarily mean that the stock itself is going to perform well. So they may meet the market cap criteria, they may meet other criteria such as revenue and things like that that are necessary to be included into the S&P 500, but that doesn't always correlate with high stock performance. All right, so this is more of a performance ETF that takes the best of the best and then prioritizes that. All right, and I want to show you guys a comparison of SPMO versus an ETF like SPY that tracks the S&P 500. So we can see on this 5-year chart, SPMO is up 151%. All right. Now, if you go over to SPY, the 5-year chart, it is up 98%, which is still very, very good. You've basically doubled your money in 5 years. But with SPMO, you've really outperformed, and you've more than doubled your money in 5 years. We can also look at year to date, right, from January 1st of 2025 up until now. SPMO has gained 26% this year, whereas SPY, the S&P 500, has gained 12%, which again is still a really good return, and that's about on par with the average annual return. But SPMO has more than doubled that because they're focused on performance, not necessarily including all 500 companies in the S&P 500. All right. And then one last thing I want to show you guys is you can go over here to dividendchannel.com, and this is one of my favorite tools because you can compare different ETFs and different stocks, right? So you type in one symbol right here, and you can either compare it to the S&P or the NASDAQ or the Dow, right, the major indexes, or you can put a different ETF in here and compare it as well. All right, so we're just going to go SPMO versus SPY, right? Let's assume that you put your money into SPY, which traditionally just tracks the regular S&P 500, and we look at this chart. All right, I'm gonna blow this up. I hope you guys can see this. Since 2015, all right, this is going back to 2015 when SPMO first, came out, and we can see total return, it is up 435% in the past 10 years, where SPY is up 285% in the past 10 years. All right, so SPMO has outperformed SPY by a lot in the past decade, and again, I think this is because they prioritize the best of the best in the S&P 500, and the results speak for itself. All right, and so that is just a quick example, but I also want to show you guys a screenshot of my brokerage account from when I first started buying into this ETF. All right, so I hope you guys can see this, but the first day that I bought into SPMO, as you can see here, was August 5th of 2025, right, last month. And you can see my first purchase was about $6,000. I am up around 5% since that purchase. All right, so these are lots. You can see this in most brokerage accounts, and it breaks down every time you've bought or sold a position, whether or not you're up or down on that position. Now, just keep in mind that this is unrealized gains. I still hold these shares, so if the market drops, this is subject to change, but this is just as of today, right, while the market is closed, or while it's Monday. The market will be open later on, but basically these are the gains that I've made unrealized on paper since I opened this position in SPMO. All right, so you can see I'm all green on every single buy. All right, now is this going to last forever? Of course not. The market is going to go through ebbs and flows. There's going to be moments where the market is down. We're going to have extended bear markets, but I'm a long-term investor, and I have a long-term mindset, 5, 10, 20 years down the road. And so for me to see this type of growth in only a month and barely 2 weeks of holding this position, I'm already seeing green on every single buy that I've made, with my most recent buy being on September 8th. This is really, really exciting. It's really motivating, and it really shows the power of this ETF, which is SPMO. And this is why this is slowly becoming one of my favorite ETFs. I think it is my favorite ETF right now. I still hold BTCI, which is a Bitcoin income ETF, and I think it's one of the best income ETFs because you get Bitcoin exposure while also receiving income. But from a growth perspective, I think this is one of the best ETFs on the market. It really prioritizes performance, and you're still well diversified between 100 different companies within the S&P 500, and twice a year this ETF is rebalanced in order to keep their basically keep their strategy within scope so that they continue to outperform the traditional S&P index. All right, so you guys let me know, what do you think about S&P? What do you think about SPMO, the Invesco S&P 500 Momentum ETF? Is it a buy? Is it a hold? You guys let me know right now. What are you investing into? Which ETFs and which stocks are you using in your portfolio in order to grow your wealth? You guys let me know in the comments. All right, as always, I appreciate you stopping by the channel, and I will catch you in the next video.